So, hey guys, are you frustrated with where you're at right now? Maybe stunted in your progress? Well, if you are, I want to recommend a place for you to go called Growth Day. Growthday.com/ed. It is the number one personal development app on the planet. It's got all kinds of high performance techniques in there, courses, accountability, journaling, live speeches from some of the top influencers in the world, including me. It's an overall environment to change your life. Growthday.com/ed. So let's take a look at how do we expand our capacity? How do we increase our self-discipline? For me, and what I would recommend for you, is that it starts out by taking an honest look and audit at the things that take away from our self-disciplines. What are the things that rob you, that steal you from your disciplines? So in my case, for example, I'll give you some things that rob me of my disciplines, that take my focus away, take my attention away, that make it more easy to do than the things I need to do. For me, some of it's television. And in my own case, it is that. Like, I really do enjoy Netflix. I'll get captivated. When I wake up in the morning, one of the things I used to do is I would do a little bit of a morning routine, but then I'd find myself flipping Sports Center on. A lot of the guys can probably relate to that. Or you flip on one of the morning TV shows. And all of a sudden, I've lost 30, 40 minutes into this abyss of things that really don't matter at that time. It's funny, my wife would say, haven't you already watched these highlights last night? You're watching the same exact highlights again the next morning. And I'm like, she's totally right. So for me, it's been sports, it's been Netflix, it's been watching sports on television. This robs me of my self-disciplines. Another thing for me is worry. Believe it or not, the emotion of worry or the emotion of fear steals my self-discipline because I'm captivated in a problem that really hasn't even existed yet, probably won't exist, but I've given my attention and my energy off the task at hand. See, there's this fallacy. I've had people on my show that have taught this, that you can multitask. The truth is there's really no such thing as multitasking. Your brain can only hold one process and one thought at one time. And so this idea that you can do three things at once, like I'll have the TV on in the background, but I'm going to write an effective chapter of my book. That is not true. That TV on in the background steals some of your self-discipline from you. For you, some of you, it might be that it's a worry addiction. It might be or addiction to a relationship. But these are the things you have to make a list of the things. For me, in a given day, what takes my self-discipline from me is worry, fear, and the process of watching screens, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through TikTok, watching YouTube, watching sports on television. So I've made lists of things that are my self-discipline stealers. And I haven't eliminated them, but I've reduced them and I schedule them in non-productive times. So it's not that I can't watch Sports Center. It's not that I can't scroll TikTok or Instagram. I can do that, but I have to schedule it in times that don't take away from moving the needle. You've got to do moving the needle activities in your life. The most successful people do the highest impact things possible in any given moment or any given day. And the people that lose or that produce subpar results or average results, they still work very hard, but they don't do the needle moving things. So in my fitness, for example, one of the needle moving things is drinking water. That's a self-discipline that is required of me to stay in my peak physical state in every given day. I'm going to show you in a minute how I make sure I do that. And then I eliminate and I make a list of the things that take that away from me. One of the other things is I have to do breath work. I have to control my breathing. I love yoga now. I'm doing a lot of yoga. And I had to, what is it that eliminates that for me? One, it's getting up too late. Two, it's turning on that television and watching sports. So I've made lists of the things that rob me of my disciplines. The second thing in self-discipline is this: show me your schedule, show me your day timer, and I will show you your life. If you show me your schedule today and what you do consistently in a given day, what you have scheduled, because what you schedule is a priority, okay? So if you show me your schedule, I will show you your life a year to 3 years from now based on today's schedule. So second thing in self-discipline is scheduling the things that matter, literally putting them in and having a time for them scheduled on a regular basis. This may seem trivial, but it's not, because there are things I need self-discipline. For me, one of the areas is like my personal friendships and relationships, even with my own family. And so for me, if I'm not careful, I won't have the self-discipline to make sure those aren't just maintained, but that they're growing and evolving in a way that's beautiful, that those people deserve in my life. And although this may sound orchestrated, I schedule those things that schedule makes me look like I've got self-discipline. Okay. But truthfully, it's just scheduled. So I have things in my calendar that says text Bella, call Max, call mom. I have scheduled these things in my calendar. When I'm in my schedule, I will do the things that are in there. So a lot of times we just schedule our appointments, don't we? We just have appointments. And that's all we have in a calendar. At the end of the day, I didn't make my contacts. I didn't tell the people that I love them. I didn't do the amount of emails I was supposed to do. I didn't take the time to write the chapter of my book. I didn't craft my social media captions. Things need to be scheduled. That's where self-discipline comes from. And then the third thing is I've built the habit of keeping the promises that I make to myself. The process of self-discipline is like a muscle that you can grow. And so I think the mistake many people make is they start with these huge things that they think require self-discipline. And unless they do these huge things, they lack it. Whereas I believe you start in the micro, you start small in life, and that's what builds the real discipline. So this may sound crazy, but I have eliminated and written down the things that take my self-discipline away. I have scheduled the things that make me look like I have self-discipline. And then third, I start with the small promises I can keep to myself. And that's to this day, 25 years later on this journey, 35 years later on this journey, I still schedule things. I still do little things that create momentum, because momentum, as I've said before, is a magnifier. Momentum can make an average, ordinary person like me produce superhuman results. So I create what might be considered artificial momentum every single day. So let me give you an example of that. I make my bed every single day. I've been doing that for many, many years. That seems insignificant, right? Because I could pay somebody to make my bed every single day. That's not why I do it. I do it because it starts my day with discipline, and it's something that I can control and I can maintain. I have a routine that I do, whatever your routine might be. For me, it could be the cold plunge or my prayer time or my meditation time, my stretching, my scripture reading. I do these things early in my day. These are promises that I can make to myself that create this identity of a self-disciplined person, when the truth is I am not one. I have not been one, but I have created an identity of a self-disciplined person. Let me give you another one. I lay my clothes out the night before for the following day. I do this whether I'm staying in a hotel room or whether I'm staying at my own house. I know that sounds insignificant. It is extremely significant, because now I've done something that I told myself I was going to do, and it's done. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm in autopilot mode. So these small things. The second thing I do, excuse me, the third thing I do, I have a big a gallon of water that I pour the night before. And when I get up, I drink half of that water. It doesn't matter if you drink 10% of it, but it's something to start my day. Whoop, self-discipline. I've done it. When I point my mind as a weapon at the small things in my life, and I start stacking those up that I do over and over and over again, now the medium-sized tasks are disciplined and the big ones are disciplined. And so I'm going to tell you that I don't think anyone has natural discipline. They build structures around them. They build systems around them. They schedule them, and they eliminate the things that take from it. And over time, they build this identity where they seem like they're incredibly disciplined people. Remember this for a second. Your brain is always trying to conserve energy. It's always trying to conserve energy. It's trying to build a habit. It is trying to do this so that it doesn't have to work to think. And so the more you do these little things, your brain wants to continue to do them. It's not just a muscle, it's how the brain functions, because now that it's just stuff that you do every single day, it doesn't have to think about it anymore. And under pressure in life, we act reflexively. Under pressure, we act reflexively. So if your reflex is to have these habits that serve you, your life becomes very easy. It also frees your brain up to be much more creative and innovative and energized and aware than people who don't have discipline. See, the benefit of discipline and self-discipline is not just that you get these things done. It's that your brain's not having to work so darn hard. See, when you don't have self-discipline, when you don't have things you do early in your day, when you don't keep promises to yourself, when you don't schedule the things, right? When you don't do those things, when you don't eliminate the things that rob you of your self-discipline, not only you're not getting stuff done, you're more tired. You're more physically exhausted. Here's the fallacy. People think self-discipline, people that get up, that work out, that do their stuff, that make their calls, that have these relationships, that are sending out a bunch of emails, that are making a bunch of contacts, they're tired. That's not the case, because after a while, this is automatic. Their brain's not having to think about it. It's just what they do. It's their routine. Your brain, on the other hand, if you're not disciplined, isn't nearly as organized. So it's having to work to think through, to get back up, to start over, to restart, to get going again. It's constantly having to work. And what you're doing is you're depleting yourself of the energies that could have gone towards creativity, focus, awareness, and intentional activities. Does that make sense? So actually, undisciplined people are more tired at the end of a day than disciplined people. And that's what I found. They say, you're 52, you're working harder than you've ever worked in your dadgum life. Why? Because I have built all these structures around me and eliminated most of the things that take my focus and discipline away, so that I am wired, man, with a ton of energy to create and innovate and think and be present in the moment, because I have self-discipline. And self-discipline is a process, is a habit. It is not something someone's born with, and it's not very complicated. What has to happen, though, is you got to do it for a while. But now the idea of not working out in a given day makes me sick to my stomach. I can't even imagine not working out. But way back in the day, I had to schedule it. I had to eliminate the sports center. I had to have the glass of water next to me. I had to have my workout clothes laid out the night before. I had to make my bed. Then I had to do you follow what I'm saying? These things make the discipline part look much harder than it is. It's actually autopilot for me now. I don't have to think about it. So there's all these benefits to having self-discipline. So hey guys, as you know, I've partnered up with my good friend Brennan Burchard, who's created the greatest personal development system that has ever been designed, called Growth Day. If you go to growthday.com/ed, you can get all the information. But it's that time of year where everybody's trying to form new habits. They've got new resolutions and goals, and you need an environment and you need some coaches, and you need to be able to do it super inexpensively. And that's where growthday.com/ed comes in. There's everything from journaling to accountability programs, live messages every Monday from myself and other influencers. There's an opportunity for you to get courses that would cost thousands of dollars completely for free. It's incredible. Go to growthday.com/ed and check it out.
Yeah, to open up rooms for you. Yeah.
I love this thing you talk about, though. So we're both free now, but you talk a lot about how important routine is to getting you to freedom, right? And so speak to routine a little bit, because we both agree about this. You say it in a more powerful way than I do. But for someone listening to this, talk about routine, because if you want, everyone wants to be free. One of the challenges, they act free before they are. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain amount of disciplines and routine and habits and rituals you got to have that could get you free at one point. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I'm gonna say honestly, man. You know, I came to the realization one day, and again, love my biological father. You know, much respect for the person that raised me. But I realized at some point, when I looked at my family's history, I was like, some things I don't want. There's some things I want, but there's some things I don't want. And then I remember having to say one day to myself, like, yo, you are your father's child. Like, yo, even though he didn't raise you, even though in the beginning you guys had, you know, whatever little stuff y'all need to get through, don't lie. You are lazy at times. You know what I'm saying? Like, you are super social and you rather talk than work. You know what I'm saying? I just had to grow up one day and just be real with myself and just say, the only way you're gonna be successful is you gotta discipline yourself. You know, when you look at a horse, I'm talking about a thoroughbred, it still needs that, what is that thing called that they put on it? He needs that. Without, you know, you can't, you gotta control him. You know, he got a lot of juice, got a lot of energy, he can go for it, but you gotta hone that. And so I realized, like, yo, you sleep in, you play video game, don't lie to yourself. You are powerful. But you have some vices, and you have some vices that take you down a crazy road. Like, you are your father, you are your grandfather, you are your mother, you are your grandmother. Like, it's real. And so I started saying, okay, you got to discipline yourself. And this is for me, this ain't for everybody. I started getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was like, yo, you're going to have to get up a little bit earlier because you didn't finish school. You didn't take care of your business. So you can't get up the same time another man who gets up, who handle his business. So you need to get up at 3 if you're going to catch the greats. You got to get up at 3. You got to go to bed earlier. This is why I said I never drank or smoked, because the men in my life who did it were extremists. I had an uncle who died, cirrhosis of the liver. You know, I had other uncles who drank, and my father, bless his heart, but he was strung out on drugs for about 14 years. And I was just like, yo, you can see that they don't know how to do it casually. Like, they ain't social drinkers. Like, they ain't social on substance. They taking it to a whole nother level. And so for me, it was like, you got to discipline yourself. You're not gonna die if you never know what alcohol tastes like. But if you taste it, you might have the same experience they had. So you just gotta discipline yourself. You know, I do vegan most of the time, you know what I'm saying? And I tell people all the time, I love fried chicken. I love macaroni and cheese. I love a lot of desserts. But in my family is diabetes. So it's like, yo, if you do what they do, then you're gonna get the results they got. So chicken is good, and macaroni and cheese, the way my grandma make it, is great. And yes, the pound cake is phenomenal. But if you want to be with Dee Dee for the next 30, 40 years, and you want to be able to walk, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to be on the cruise. I was just on the cruise, and a couple people, you know, was on the motor scooter, you know what I'm saying? People with the canes and the walkers. And I'm not mad at them. But I'm like, I don't want that. I want to be able to walk at 60, at 70. I want to be independent at 80 if I can be. So I'm going to have to make some sacrifices now for the long run. I would drink pop every day if I could. But
is everybody hearing this, though? Like, I mean, listen, all of us that want to win, like you already said, like I got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning if I'm going to catch the greats, because I started with some deficiency.
Absolutely.
Successful people are very self-aware. Like they don't BS themselves, right? Like I have laziness too.
Absolutely.
I love laying around. I love sleep, right? No, but before I wouldn't have got to sleep here if I was just me. I had to get these rituals and habits and disciplines. And people think sometimes they listen to me and we're so intense, like these dudes are freaks. I'm not a freak.
No.
I don't.
But you know why they say that? Because it makes it easier for them to say, I can't do it if they freaks, then I can't do it.
That's their out. You're exactly right. And I'm not going to give you that out. Neither are you. Like, I'm lazy. I got to get up early. I got to get up because if I don't get up by I get up at 4:35, but if I don't get up by then, I will be in bed at 8 o'clock. I have to get up. I have to move my body. So I'm with you 100%. So, hey, guys, if you're like me, I am always on the lookout to try to eliminate these cold and flu symptoms. I got to tell you, literally right now, as I'm recording this, the last 3 or 4 days, I was struggling. I've had a cough. I've been congested. I tried an IV. I went and did a bunch of vitamin C. I've tried about everything under the sun. None of it has been working. Bam, someone sends me Armra colostrum, and it has changed everything. Here's the kicker. In clinical trials, bovine colostrum was found to be at least 3 times more effective than the flu vaccine at preventing the flu. So here's our special offer. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/Mylett. That's TRYARMRA.com/Mylett, or enter Mylett to get 15% off your first order. That's tryarmra.com, TRYARMA.com/Mylett. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. These statements and information are not a substitute for or alternative to seeking care from your healthcare providers.
I think also that if you've had some success too, that if it doesn't come with a dose of humility, that when you begin to walk into every room and every environment and think you've already figured it out, you already know, this stunts growth as well, because what you're saying is it blunts you taking in new data and new information.
Correct. You get it. You totally get it. You are denying yourself better data, more data to inform the decisions that happen. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself, right?
All right, give us the exercise. We've been building enough. Give us one.
Yeah, okay. So this is I'm going to give you a longer one just to describe the steps, and then we'll do like one that you can do anytime, all the time.
Okay.
So this is like a basic mindfulness practice, and I call it, again, tied to what we're talking about in the book and attention, the find your flashlight practice.
Great.
Because oftentimes it's not that we can't focus, it's that we don't know where we're focusing at any moment.
That's true.
So the instruction would be, and I guide people to kind of ramp up to about 12 minutes a day that our data suggests is beneficial to do this. But to start out, like do 30 seconds of this, commit to that for a few weeks and see how that goes. So the practice is essentially find a quiet, comfortable spot and take this time seriously, even if it's 30 seconds or a minute. Sit in an upright, alert posture, like a dignified, if we do it now, it's just like upright, alert, dignified. And first step is just acknowledge, notice, shine the floodlight on your experience that you're breathing right now. Then what you're going to do is hone in on something that actually you notice is prominent in your experience of breathing. So do you notice anything that feels prominent, like the coolness of air maybe by your nose or maybe your chest?
It's actually the sound I'm making.
Okay,
nasally.
great.
Yes.
Yeah, the sound, that's a great one too. That's where you're going to point the flashlight. That's your attentional target for this short practice. So direct that flashlight right there. Keep it steady. You can close your eyes if you want to, whatever you choose, just to limit the sensory input. And if it hasn't happened yet, it surely will. Your mind will wander. And all you do in that moment is notice it. Ah, the mind has wandered away. Next step, take that flashlight, redirect it back to that same attentional target. And repeat. So it's essentially focus, point that flashlight, notice, use the floodlight, redirect, get the juggler to do its job.
Oh my goodness. You know, can I ask about that?
Yeah, please.
When I first started this, there was like a judgment when I drift away.
Oh no, it's a total win.
But
it's a win
it's
moment.
actually a win because it gives us a chance to redirect the flashlight, right? This is so important because I used to, I don't know, maybe you're further along than me, but in the beginning I was like, gosh, man, I'm gone this for like 24 seconds and then I'm out. But you're actually saying that's actually a gift when we drift away because it allows us to build this flashlight, I'll call it a muscle, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we're coming back. That's really good.
But now I hope it makes sense why I wanted to describe those three systems, because we hit all three in this.
It does.
And I think it's really important to not think of the wandering as a problem. The wandering, remember we started out talking about,
right.
50% of the time, it's the nature of the mind. I didn't say, Ed, if you happen to be one of those weird people whose mind wanders, like us normal people don't have that, you have mind wandering. I didn't say that. I said, when your mind wanders, because it's going to wander, for sure. Just bring it back. And not doing that with the added story, the added reactivity is so important.
You know, I was just thinking of the, I did a lot of work when I was younger, and I do now with kids, and I have so many parents almost judge their children for he can't stay focused in the classroom, he drifts away. And I'm just thinking right now, like, what a breakthrough this might be for some parents who are listening to this to realize that that's actually, everyone is at 50%. Maybe your kid reveals it more than other kids do, doesn't conceal it as well. Maybe it manifests in talking out loud as opposed to scribbling on a sheet of paper, so it's more apparent. But this is something that even with, do you believe it, is there a particular age where you believe a child might be able to begin to build this, I'm calling it building a muscle because everybody can relate to that.
I think it is. It's practice, it's strengthening. So the first thing to say is that this brain system of attention is one of the slowest to develop. We don't fully develop this capacity till we're about 25. And one of the reasons is it relies on the frontal lobes, which are the slowest brain region to develop. So, you know, it does kind of drive me nuts sometimes, and I feel for parents when they're not happy that their children aren't paying attention, or their response is, pay attention. It's not gonna help at all. And in fact, understanding that that's the thing that it's your child is not paying attention because they don't know that they should often. It's that they don't know where their attention is. Just like we are saying we don't know.
That's good.
So I think that the thing to really, and by the way, yes, absolutely, there's a huge enterprise of offering mindfulness training in a developmentally appropriate manner to children as young as preschool.
Really?
We can do these in very useful ways for children, but what you're having them cultivate is not just focus, focus, focus. It's, where are you right now? You know, where are you? In a friendly, self-supportive way. And is that where you want to be right now? You know, when you talk to yourself in that manner of like, where am I right now? Is that where I want to be? All of a sudden, the world doesn't feel as dire. Like, oh, I'm over here. I think I want to be over there instead. I think that's what I should be doing right now, is being over there. It's a different relationship. And the younger that we can get people to start understanding that this is befriending your mind in a way that allows it to be used to your benefit.
That's
instead
fascinating
of being
to me.
Punitive to yourself.
I'm just thinking, I'm sitting here as a 50-year-old man. I've done different forms of meditation, mindfulness. I'm a relatively productive human being. And I'm confessing to the audience that oftentimes I'm going 24 seconds and I'm out of my attention my attention has changed rather. So the idea that we're concerned about our 8-year-old who might have the exact same, or does have the exact same scenario that I do. I'm just curious, has there been any data? Are kids even more than 50% where their attention moves, or would you assume that because those frontal lobes aren't as developed, or is it pretty much the same?
Okay, so here's the tricky part of assessing that with children, by the way. What does it take for you to even know if somebody's on task or off task, right? They have to have the awareness. It's something called meta-awareness. Awareness or attention to your attention. That is also a developmentally slow process. So we're getting a fuzzy read on them. I mean, we could take them into the lab and look directly at their performance on tasks, and yeah, they mind wander a lot. Their attention can be off often, off task often. But I don't think that's the thing we want to help cultivate, which is the counterintuitive thing. And I mean, I refer to it in the book as like a peak mind pivot. It's like we think that to focus better, we think we need to train ourselves to focus. And I'm saying no. to focus better, train your mind to notice when you're not focused.
Gosh, very good.
So, that's a totally different set of, you're exercising the floodlight and the juggler. The flashlight will do its thing. It knows how to do its thing, but really pay attention to the understanding of where your mind is moment by moment.
I did that during your TED Talk. You actually say something similar during your TED Talk.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, where am I now?
Yeah.
And then I'm back with you. And then where am I now? And then I came back with you.
And that's it. 24 seconds, if you're truly going 24 seconds, we got to bring you to the lab because that's really good.
I made the number up. It's probably more like 2.4 seconds. I don't know.
But I actually asked a colleague of mine who'd been practicing mindfulness for 30 years because I was getting, in the initial stages when I was just trying to understand what this thing is, I was like, I'm not going very long before my mind wanders. And will that be the thing that will extend as I practice more? That was my thinking. Like, that's a reasonable hypothesis. I might, if it's, 5 seconds now, maybe it'll be 10 and 15.
Yeah.
And each year I might get longer before it wandering. And I was very humbled by what he said. He said, 30 years of practice. He said, 7 seconds.
No kidding.
But so at first I'm like, oh great, what am I been bothering? Like, it's still gonna be 7 seconds after 30 years. But what he said next really helped. He said, what has happened is that my mind now, instead of being completely lost in a fantasy or a doomsday scenario, and I love that it was like almost poetic. He's like, it's like I'm seeing the ripples at the distance of the placid lake. And I was like, he really knows his mind. Like, he can tell a slight tug. He doesn't have to go full on into, next vacation's been planned while you're trying to do 5 minutes of a mindfulness practice. That felt so much more like he knows his mind. He knows where it is that with that level of granularity.
Yeah.
And in some sense, this is the part that I think is also really interesting, especially as we talk about athletes and military service members and special operators, et cetera. It's this sense that you develop, because you know your mind, a sense of, I'm going to use the term, mental toughness. It's like, I know this space. I know the lake. It may not always be placid. It's usually, for me, like a rough, stormy place.
Right.
But I can take anything. Like, my mind is here for it. And frankly, that's developing that same floodlight capacity. I am here. I'm present for it. I'm not going to be thrown off. I'm steady in the middle of whatever's going on.
Very good. I think some of the most self-confident people I know are just more self-aware, and I think that's actually what you're describing. There's an awareness of self. I'm loving this, and I want to keep going. So I want to ask you about, you've described things in visual terminology a lot, and I'd like to think that I am a visual person also, although I don't know that there's such a thing. I'm wondering if part of that self-awareness are some people more predisposed to be kinesthetic or auditory or visual in their in the deductions they make, in the observations that they make? And is that something to be cognizant of about yourself when you're in a state of attention, that you are not just, I feel like I'm very visual, but maybe every single person is, or are there more auditory predisposed people, kinesthetic, visual?
I mean, the jury is out. Most people say now that, like, the notion of learning styles or specific modalities is not all that well supported. So I would say we don't know yet if that's actually the case. But frankly, the bulk of the brain as human beings compared to our little dogs that run around, so dominant with vision.
Visual.
But you brought up something that I want to like kind of ping that.
Yeah.
Because what you described is not what I'm talking about when I use the term meta-awareness. What you just described, very powerful thing to do, is something we call metacognition. So both of these are tied to self-awareness, but meta-awareness is a different thing. So metacognition is essentially knowing your tendencies, knowing your styles, knowing your decision-making capacities, your strengths, your weaknesses. I mean, everything you just described would be really great to know for your metacognitive style, for example. Okay. And yes, it can definitely, there could be differences, maybe not tactile or visual, but there are definitely differences in the way people operate metacognitively. So you may be a maximizer in your decision-making versus a satisfier. There's these different orientations. But I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about when I talk about the floodlight, because remember, the floodlight system is really about the now. And meta-awareness is awareness of the moment-to-moment processes and contents within your mind. So it doesn't really matter from the meta-awareness point of view what your tendencies are. What is going on right now? Where is your mind right now? And I think that what's important now kind of orientation is so important in performance context.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what you're doing. I'm like, what's going on now?
Is it always important to be in the now? In other words, is it bad to be dreaming in the future? Is it it's like bad or good? I don't even like that terminology, but
Useful.
Yeah. Is it useful? Okay,
Such
better.
a great question.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked me that because I don't want it to seem like I'm saying, always be here right now.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, this capacity to mentally time travel, just like you did with your, what did you have for dinner last night, right? Is so useful for us. In fact, it may be the thing that defines us in our evolutionary advantage as human beings, right? We can displace ourselves in something called time travel, right? We can rewind the mind, we can fast forward the mind. You heard about me talking about that a little bit in the TED Talk. But it's not just about time traveling, it's also about mind traveling.
Okay, what's that mean?
Mind traveling is essentially putting yourself in the shoes and mind of somebody else. So both of those are really, really powerful things to do. When we talk about mindfulness, it's a solution to a vulnerability in our capacity to do both of those things. So the problem with time travel, though it's extremely useful for productively reflecting or planning, it becomes problematic under certain states. And I do think of the athletes, like my heart go out to them oftentimes when I see mess ups, right? Like you did something, you totally messed up, and it happens. You glitched. If you can't stop rewinding the mind, you are no way going to be able to succeed in the next moment. So how do you get yourself to not rewind?
Very good.
Right? So, or...
Amishi, that's really good.
Yeah, and I think that the other part is you may be in not necessarily the athletic setting, but in our, like even during COVID, like if you can't stop catastrophizing and worrying about the future...
You got it.
You're stuck. You're going to probably have a lot of anxiety. So the reason we want to, and frankly, the same thing goes with mind traveling. If I'm constantly preoccupied about your view of me, social anxiety is going to set in. So the reason mindfulness became such an important solution for me, going back to why we study in my lab, is because each of those things, ruminating about the past, catastrophizing about the others, overly caring about the viewpoints of an evaluation on yourself, hijack attention. It depletes attention.
Gosh, it's so good.
So
you're describing from a scientific standpoint all the things that people listening to this go, like, I know this is true.
Yeah.
And I think the rewinding thing, man, that's just huge. So many people are in the rewind and just beating themselves up and repeating the same story over and over again. But the other thing that I've figured out is that oftentimes stress is time travel in the future. Meaning that it's not so much the speech you have to give or the sale you have to close or the putt you have to hit that is stressing you out. It's you projecting into the future the negative result of it, and then on top of that, what other people are going to think or say about you when you miss the putt, when you don't close the sale.
Exactly.
Is that not true?
Exactly. You described both the mind travel and the time travel, right? Those are what I would really call the kryptonite scenarios. Like you're really, what all of that is doing is attention's still being used, and you're draining it out. You're draining the fuel in spinning in those directions. So how do you it's easy to say, well, don't do that. Get back to here and now. It's easy to say it. It's very hard to do because the tendencies are so strong. So you got to train for it, just like anything else that's hard to do.
You were going to give us one other, I think you're going to give us one other
So let me
one.
give you the other
another
one.
training.
It's
And
like
then,
a
by the way,
mini-
let's get Peak Mind. Let's get the book so that we
You
also,
get the whole thing,
you get the
right.
whole thing. That's the whole idea. But one more of them would be, I'm driving in my car and I'm like, I want her to give me one
Well,
more.
the car is a perfect example. You didn't even know I was going to go there.
Okay.
This other practice is just called the stop practice.
Okay.
Literally STOP. And do it while you're driving.
Okay.
Do it while you're walking. Do it at any time you want. Stop is stop. Like whatever the progression of your life is in that moment, halt it. Take a breath, and that's this conscious breath, aware that you're doing it. Observe, O. Proceed, P. So it's a mini mindfulness practice, and I really think it's useful because you know where your flashlight is at the end of it. I know it's right here, right now. I'm back. So use stop signs, use red lights to remind yourself to do that over and over again.
So good. I'm just thinking of something. When you asked me to do that, I actually did it with you, and I actually noticed a couple things in my visual space that have been here the entire time that I didn't see. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we're going a little bit deeper probably than I should, but there's a lot of things that your brain does on habit mode, correct? Like if I'm driving to work and I take the same off-ramp every single day, I think my brain is storing energy by doing something that's habitual. That's how I've always understood it anyways, that I'm taking that same off-ramp. Whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The point that I want to make about that is that for me, I think for most people, being present is, even though, yes, there's a benefit to being in the future and rewinding, there's a benefit to being reflective and reminiscing in the past and gaining wisdom from it. But for most of us, that's not a struggle for most people. The struggle for most people is being present.
You got it.
And that's why this is so important, what you're teaching here. And for me, there's so many things in a given day that mindfulness practices make me just aware of being present, that I'm curious as to, in practical application, how much time a day, I know there's no formula, but if you were just saying, hey, Ed, I'd recommend to you, it's 10 minutes a day, it's 5 different times a day, it's once a day, do it at the same time of the day, doesn't matter when you do it. What would your advice be on just building this practice, so to speak?
As the habit aspect?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last line of the title is invest 12 minutes a day.
Yeah,
So
I know.
that gives you a sense of, and that number comes out of many studies that have suggested, you know, if you get to that amount, we tend to see benefits, and the more you do from that, the more you benefit. But if you don't quite get to that, it's almost like, is going for a walk in my neighborhood, walking my dog, going to build my physical fitness? Probably not. It's not going to be bad for you, but you're not going to get to that level. So here's the answer to the question of, so the when would be, and you can get a deeper understanding of why I say 12 minutes if you read more about it, but just know that it comes from a lot
I just want them to
a
know.
lot
you
of
know,
research. No, I know,
right.
but I'm just saying, but your question regarding when to do it and the habit issue is the best time to do it is when you're going to do it.
Okay.
And that's kind of maybe a cop-out, but literally the key to anything, and you'd probably say the same thing regarding physical excellence, right? The key is advantaging your capacity to create it and incorporate it into daily routine.
Yeah.
And so what I suggest for people, like I just said when we were doing the short practice, if you think you can do 3 minutes, set the goal of a minute and a half and get the win of I did it, I did it, I did it. And yoke it to something that you already do. You know, my recommendation is something that you know you're going to do every day without exception, maybe right after you brush your teeth in the morning, or maybe right before you have your cup of coffee, sometime that you know you're going to do it. And what I would suggest is just to play around with when that works for you is to try it at different times of the day. What many people say when we say try the morning, you know, just play around with the time of day, is like people say things like, I love the taste of my coffee so much more. It's like I actually taste it.
Gosh, it's so true. I can't.
You know, so,
it's so
and
true.
why are you depriving yourself of that, right? Why are we rushing through? I mean, you're going to have the coffee anyway. Why not have a little bit more pleasure with that experience?
So I have to just say though, I was going to tell you off camera, but I'm so glad you said this because I forgot.
Yeah.
Which is that I just want to give everybody the gift of this. That by the way, I'm nowhere near where you would be or other people. I don't think there's rankings either. By the way, it's not a judgment thing. But my sensory experiences, just in general, have been so dramatically increased by this practice. People always say to me that there's this duality. Maybe one of the reasons they even like me is that maybe I'm sort of like maybe a masculine dude, but I'm very emotional and very sensitive. I don't know that I've always been that way, but like I do find that I experience my emotions on a deeper level over the last decade or so, that my laughter is a little deeper and more joyous. The taste of food is a little bit more pleasurable. My acknowledgement and noticing beauty around me and the nuances and specificities of it, and not just the visual, but smells and wind hitting my face. I know this sounds ridiculous to some people. It's just richer because of this practice. Never mind being far more present and productive. And I think also for me, peak is such a word that I've used over and over. When I'm fully present, it appears to me that I've got better access to my vocabulary, better access to insights in reading somebody. Do you similar experience for you?
I mean, for sure. And it can be life-saving in many ways. And actually, you know, you described the plus side, and I think it's so great. It's like almost like, you mean I can just have more joy by being here more? Yeah, you can. But there's another part that I think is very important in the context of our action and our humanity. We're also more present to the suffering of other people. We're also more connected to other people. We also have more sense and respect for the humanity of others around us and for the environment. And I think that at this particular point, kind of in our human history,
Consciousness.
we need to be more aware of what the heck is going on. We have very little time to like try to make things better for our planet, for example. And also with all the injustices happening, and I was talking recently to somebody regarding this notion of burnout, and so many people are feeling so burnt out. Can mindfulness help with burnout? And the answer is yes, mindfulness can help with burnout. But actually, in the context of a conference I was at with critical care nurses. Now we know over COVID, that has been a group that has been very, very crunched, right? And the question was, can mindfulness help me with burnout? And I said yes. And they said, but then the system, that the organization of the scheduling is the reason I feel burnt out. And I was like, yes, but there's no way you're going to demand change or even conceptualize how to create change if you don't have the capacity to see what's going on.
Yes.
So just use that as the next step to give back to those who may not have this capacity yet. It's like as the more present we are, the more we can enact change and empower other people to do the same.
You're so right, and I know you're right, but people have told me that the last 10 years or so, I'm just using practical experience for me, you're more patient than you used to be. That's sort of more like a symptom almost, that it is more what you have described, which is that I try to be present with people and see them and hear them and experience them more than fix them like I used to, and try to truly empathize and understand their experience and their reality. And I've always felt since I started this, like I wish more of, I don't care what political party you're part of, I wish more political people had that ability for empathy and understanding and just stopped and listened to people and didn't assess it all the time. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I attribute some, if not most of that, to these practices. Because obviously I'm a performer, peak performer, expert person supposedly, but it's the other benefits of doing this that have enriched my life far more than the fact that I've made more money because I'm more present with people or these other things. I'm actually curious about this. What about memory? So is it that my memory can be improved because of this, because I was actually present in more moments, so I have better recall because my attention was where I was more often? Or is it that there's something happening in my brain where I'm developing the ability to recall and remember things better? Pretty good question, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So because you could say, well, yeah, your memory's better. Well, maybe that's just because I was more present. Or is there actually something operating in my brain where is there new myelin forming in my brain? I don't know.
Well, first of all, this conversation is changing your brain. I mean, I don't just mean because it's some kind of massively transformative thing. Every experience we have impacts the way our brain functions. So there's no divide between experience and brain changes. They're just happening concurrently, right?
Okay.
So yes, it is the case. So you have such a great intuition about neuroscience. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So yes, it is the case that the more we can get, the more attentive we are, the more granular, fine-grained the inputs are for our memory. In fact, attention is the gateway for memory. If you don't pay attention, there's no way that you're going to have the experience of encoding episodes in your life, gaining new information. Now, there are aspects of our memory that are outside the scope of something you need attention for after it's well learned. So for example, if I tell me across the board of a keyboard what the letters are, I mean, I couldn't tell you, but if you give me a keyboard, I can type it. So that's an example of something we call procedural memory, which is you actually don't need your attention for that. But for episodes and knowledge, you need attention to input the information. You also need your attention to pull it out. So remember we were talking about the flashlight and your dinner meal? You have to have clarity of directing it to call up the right thing. So it is on both ends of that. And frankly, there's another thing to think about, which is that what did you call it, Mylett? So yes, it ends up that long-term memory is a structural change within the brain. It actually becomes like fixed hard in terms of the neural connections that occur. That process is helped by having clarity of mind, and actually just kind of to really tie the loose ends of this conversation together, current models suggest maybe that's where all this mind wandering is actually happening. It may be a memory encoding process. The reason the brain pumps out thoughts isn't because it's just trying to mess with us, it's because that's the way episodic memory encoding happens. It's a replay button that just happens by default, and as it keeps replaying, things kind of harden into long-term memory.
Oh, this is so good. All right. First off, I want everybody to get Peak Mind. I want them to get your book. The reason that I want them to get the book is because I think the application of what you're teaching is different for many different people. And I love things that have broad application. So I think if you're an athlete, you want to read this book. I think if you're someone who wants to find a little bit more bliss in your life and be more present, I think this is a book that you should have. And I think just having an overall understanding of one's self is why I think this work is so fascinating. And it's why my audience knows I love every interview that I do. I don't talk to people that I don't want to share with the world, but there are certain topics that just fascinate me because I like to understand why some of the things I teach work. I understand some of it. And you're helping me so much with that.
I have to make a confession. Before I watched the show, I didn't think cheer was a sport. I didn't. I'm looking at, pom-poms and whatever I've seen in a movie before. And then I watched this. These are unbelievable athletes, incredible. And the danger level of what you all do. So just quick education on cheer, but then we're going to get into like lessons on life and coaching and leading people in business too. But when did this change? Like, where have I been? All-star cheer is like this thing that sort of turned it, I guess, a little bit, right? But like, just if people haven't seen the show, explain to us how this is an absolutely very detailed sport.
Yeah, cheerleading has definitely changed it over the years, even from when I was, a cheerleader myself. When I cheered in the late 80s, and around that time, late 80s, early 90s, all-star cheerleading came about, and that really changed the industry in its entirety. We did competitive cheerleading in high school, but it was on a much smaller level. And what happened with all-star cheerleading, we started seeing where these kids were trained from basically birth, or really like 3 years old. You could have an opportunity to compete, and so they created these opportunities for people to be coached by really great coaches. Because in school cheerleading, a lot of times you have your science teacher that's the sponsor, and it really is not there's no education behind it. So there's no coach that's qualified to really get you to the next level. For myself, I did gymnastics until I was able to do school cheerleading. So I think that's what a lot of people did. They had a gymnastics background if they were interested in it. But anyways, it provided this platform where kids could come in and like grow from a very young age. Just like with club baseball, you go and you start travel ball and you're playing at an elite level from an early age. And all-star cheerleading also, you compete many times throughout the year. So your experience is just every single year you're gaining more and more experience. So by the time you get to me at college, I saw from the time I started and until now, just the evolution of this, and the talent was growing, and these kids were coming more and more experienced. And of course, it made my job easier, but definitely all-star cheerleading changed everything about cheerleading, and hopefully cheer changed everybody's opinion of it, because it definitely, competitive cheerleading is not your pom-poms and your sideline, just trying to look cute.
It's mind-blowing, everybody. If you haven't seen the show, one, the discipline level, the athleticism, and frankly, the danger level of the precision of what they need to do. And then it comes down to about 2 minutes and 15 seconds for the whole deal. Is just compelling. The stories of the way it's done. It's so fun. I have to tell you, Monica, I'm a dude, right? The way I found out about your show is I'm golf, and you're playing with dudes. Like, hey, did you see the Laker game last night? You see this? You watch Ozark on Netflix, and then over and over, guys are like, have you seen Cheer on Netflix? I'm like, what the hell are you, Cheer? Like, and then they're like, bro, you need to see this. It's unbelievable. And you got to see this coach. And I'm like, finally, about 11 or 12 different men on golf courses told me this. I'm like, I got to see it. And then it's one of these things, like, you're going to binge it. You can't, the stories of these precious kids that are there, and Monica, it's awesome. So I just want to acknowledge the show. It's so, so good. But so is this book. And
Thank
very
you.
rarely do you get someone who's won 14 national championships write a book and say, let me show you about my formula, my recipe for leadership. And again, this applies as an entrepreneur, for you one-on-one in your life, you as a parent. You're going to love this book. But I want to go to some of, like, that's the foundation. Chapter 1 is called Discipline as a Gift. And then you talk about something called, so here we go, guys. There's, like, if you're driving in the car, you could pull over. You call it compassionate discipline. And it's a perfect description of what I observed of you in your coaching style. So just talk about that a little bit for a minute, compassionate discipline, and why it's a gift.
Well, I think discipline is a good thing, and I think structure is a good thing, and expectations. And a lot of times, people come from all different backgrounds, and they don't really have those at home.
Mhm.
And those are the things that really can take you to the next level. And but also being empathetic and being able to relate and make them feel like you care about them, because at the end of the day, people are going to go that extra mile when they feel appreciated and when they feel like you care. And so obviously I'm a mother, and so my perspective is, how would I want someone to treat my child? How would I want not only my child, but how would I want someone to speak to me? And so I try to discipline with a mutual respect, and I'm not a yeller. I think a lot of people think of being tough and disciplined as yelling, and we see the typical football, you're in your face, and I like passion too, and we can have those moments of passion. But I think the biggest part is there's a big learning curve when 18-year-olds go to college and they're off on their own for their first time, and they need the rules and they need to be held accountable, but they also need some understanding and some love. And I think it's just a great combination for people to want to listen and want to do better. And, you know, uh, yelling doesn't do it. You have to have a combination of something else.
You do that really well. I want to go a little deeper on it because I'm just thinking about different moments in the show where, even in the season one, one of the first shows where the girl's going to be at the top of the what I call the pyramid, hurts herself, and you're like, we're going to have to take her out and put someone else in, and these situations happen in business all the time. Most people avoid confrontation in life, even in their marriage. They'll let it stack and stack and stack. You have this really interesting thing because you're firm and you're incredibly truthful, right? Very, very truthful. Like, but yet you do it in a loving way. Do you ever step back and like, if you have an emotion, like you're upset with them, do you ever like let it breathe a minute before you communicate? Do you have anything you do? Because that's, to me, maybe your great strength. And the other one we're going to come up with in a minute is with this loving, very candid feedback, though. Most people don't do either one of those things. Are you conscious of doing it that way?
I mean, yes, I think so, because
Mhm.
I think especially with coaching, if I am not direct, it can lead to confusion or expectations that are not real on their part. And I would want someone to be honest with me, so that even if it makes me upset, I mean, I can deal with it and I can move forward. If I'm
Mm.
constantly in a state of, well, maybe I have a chance at this, or maybe that's unfair, I think, to them. If you give them direct feedback and expectations, then it gives them very specific goals to work for and know what they need to do. If they,
Mm.
don't make Matt, what do I need to do to make Matt? Well, to be honest, this is
Right.
where you're at. And,
Mm.
I don't know. I just would want someone to be honest with me and not let me sit there, thinking that I have a chance at doing something, when the reality is, if I don't have this specific skill, or, if I'm not working on this particular thing, I'm not going to be able to get that spot. Also, it gives them a goal, like I said, to work for. If they know that, oh, this is the one thing I'm missing, let me go and put some time into that and work on it. But like I said, I really honestly have always come from a place of, I want to have respectful conversations and speak to them in a way I would want to be spoken to, which is why I'm not a yeller. I don't want to feel like someone is being condescending or embarrassing me. I don't think embarrassing anyone. And of course, it happens at times, because sometimes
Sure.
we're in a moment, and
Yeah.
you're going to be really direct at that moment. But for the most part, I think pulling people to the side and having these open, honest, direct conversations in a very loving way is
Mm.
that's what's worked for me. And yes, sometimes I do need to take a moment. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen season two, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to walk outside, because
Yes, you do.
I don't have a good attitude right now, and it's going to
Yeah.
probably spill over in how I start coaching in a minute. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
go and like fix myself.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that I feel like I earn their respect, and to
Mm.
me, honestly, the biggest thing of leadership, whether you're leading your family, your children, or
Mm.
whatever, is they have to respect you. And so I really work on myself a lot so that I'm earning that respect.
Mm. It's interesting. You use that word a lot. Use it with them. I was just thinking. I mean, I do these interviews. I get to share them with everybody, but a lot of times they're for me. And I reflect on myself when I was early in my business career, before I had kids, because you're intense. Just so you guys know, this is an intense woman. You don't win 14 national championships if you're not one crazy person, intense wise. She's a crazy person, just so you know. By the way, I think crazy is good. I love crazy people. Weird, rich, and successful, normal, poor, and unsuccessful. So I like that you're crazy. I'm crazy. But before I had kids, I think I had disrespectful conversations sometimes with people. It's something about having babies. I would never want someone to speak to my son or my daughter that way. So you use that word respect a lot, both how you treat these young people and yourself. And a lot of times as a leader, when you've won a bunch of titles and you're the coach and they're a kid, it'd be easy to have a disrespectful tone. And as a business owner or an entrepreneur, same thing in business. I own this place, you work for me. It can come across as disrespectful. So I want to really highlight that part of it. And it's something that she does incredibly well. And it's how you galvanize a group. The second thing I think you're incredible at is instilling belief in people and getting each of them to believe in themselves and getting them to believe as a collective team as well. Is that something you think about consciously and you're always sort of like embeddedly commanding belief into people?
I think so, for sure. I think I'm careful with my words, and it comes with that championship culture. You have to have everybody buy in, not only to the program but to themselves as well, because they are at such an elite level. If they start doubting themselves, it'll affect their performance. But um, I think our culture, I worked really hard in having that culture, and the athletes have always bought in, and it makes my job a little bit easier because they are holding each other accountable on that as well. But I definitely choose my words wisely, and when there are in situations where we're going through something difficult or we're struggling or whatever, I have to keep in mind that I'm the one they're looking to know, like, if we're in a storm, we're going to get out of the storm. If we're having a tough day at practice, it's okay because tomorrow's a new day and we're going to hit that pyramid or whatever. I mean, we go through, just struggling in practice or bigger things that are happening within the team or with different people. So I always know that I have to be that support and that calm within the storm. And so I do choose my words wisely, and I try to always keep it in a positive, like, we're going to overcome this. I mean, you saw in season 1 when when Austin got hurt on the band shell. That's never happened before. In my mind, I was terrified. I thought, I don't know how we're going to overcome this, but I knew that everyone's looking at me, and I was like, oh, we've got this. Y'all did amazing. Like, all these positive things, that I'm trying to, it's not that big a deal. We have this. We've practiced this over and over. That's not what I was thinking in my head. I was going through some stuff.
No, that's one big thing as a leader, is not showing hurt and showing, I call it equanimity, calm under duress and pressure, right? And it's just, these are things you hear all the time and you go, yeah, no, but do you really do them if you're listening to this? Think about your family for a second. Your family has a culture. Are you conscious of it? Because a lot of times you bring the culture from the family you grew up in into your new family unconsciously.
Yep.
Little things like, if you weren't hugged a lot when you were a kid, maybe you don't hug your kids as much. There's a cultural thing. How do you build a culture, by the way? I know that's a broad question, but is that something you start out, you go, I'm going to build something here special? Is it one of these things where you want people to feel special that they're at Navarro College? You put on our uniform, there's something special about being here. Do you think about those things, or is it just like the culture just becomes a reflection of the coach?
I think it just becomes a reflection because I was very young when I started. I mean, I had zero experience.
You were basically right out of college, right? For everybody's understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had no intention of coaching ever. I, have a business degree in finance, and I honestly, my ultimate goal was to move to New York City and work on Wall Street. I thought, for some reason, I thought that was the ultimate goal that I should look towards. And but I graduated college early, so I was 21 when I graduated, and moved to Dallas. I married my high school sweetheart. We moved to Dallas for a year, and I was working at a computer company that I really not. It was just the first job offered to me to pay the bills, to to figure out what we were going to do. And a friend of mine was the baseball coach at Navarro, and he called me one day and he was like, "Hey, our cheerleading coach is leaving. You should come and apply for this job." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, um, it was I grew up there, so I was like, I guess I could do that. I don't really don't like what I'm doing right now, and it'll be a good stepping stone. Give me some time to figure out what I want to do."
Wow.
So I applied for the job, no coaching experience at all. Like I said, I'd only been out of college for a year, and got the job. And so I basically learned everything from trial
Good
and
man.
error and just studying my butt off, because I was, I got there and there were only 14 people on the team when I got there. And so, of course, they'd never won. They weren't not good. They were decent, but they were not, nobody knew who we were by any means. And so I'm very competitive. And I was like, I want to build this program up. Like, even if I'm here for a year or two, like, I want to be the best, because that's just, if I'm, playing a card game, I want to win every single time. That's
There
just
you
who
go.
I am. I'm competitive
Mhm.
and I want to be the best at whatever I'm doing. So I started, trying to learn and figure out how to do that. And I really just took everything that I learned in business, because I thought, well, to earn the ultimate respect, I need to win a national championship. That's what I need to do. And how am I going to do that? We have 14 people on the team. Um, so I just started, I thought, actually, this is what I did. I was like, how do I win a national championship? Well, I get the most points. How do I get the most points? Well, let me look at a score sheet. I need to maximize my points in all of these categories. How do I do that? Okay, well, this means we're going to need to get really good in all these categories.
Mhm.
So I kind of started, from the goal and worked backwards and tried to, recruit people. And at that time, it was not, I mean, I literally was going into the weight room. I see a big guy and I'm like, "Hey, would you be interested in coming and letting us teach you how to throw some girls?"
Really?
Yeah, I mean, because, cheerleading, the talent pool wasn't as big, because it, like I said, it was right
Sure.
at the start of all-star
Yeah.
cheerleading. There weren't a lot of guys. A lot of the guys that were involved, really, they got involved because their girlfriends were a cheerleader. They played football. They were like,
Mhm.
oh, they started throwing some people around and realized how, it's kind of like addicting to have,
Mhm.
what else can I do? And so, um, early on, there just weren't a lot of males, out there to recruit. So we're just recruiting and really teaching the guys that, I did actually have some boyfriends of the girls that we taught and pulled into to the team. So just started there, and, built, I didn't know. So like I said, I didn't go in and go, "Oh, I'm going to build this championship culture." I was really just like, "Wait, what, I want to win. So let me start there." And then it just started kind of coming together, but I always knew, like, what kind of person I am. And I thought the most important thing, like I said from the beginning, was I need their respect, and I need to make sure that I'm working on myself to earn that. And I want
Mhm.
to make sure I'm living my life by leading by an example and doing what I expect them. So I
Yeah.
really tried to make sure that in my own personal life, I was, you know, being a good person. And,
Mhm.
if I expect you to do this, I'm going to do it times 1,000. I'm going to show you how to do it through my actions. And
Yeah.
so, because of that, the buy-in was pretty quick.
Yeah.
These kids were buying in, because they were like, I want to, they wanted to make me proud. I mean, I've heard that so
That's
many
it.
times. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so I really think that was how we started building this. I was doing my job by being a good leader and by being a good example, and
Yeah.
they wanted to follow that example, you
Yeah.
know.
I think you said so much there. The first thing that you said was about being competitive. Every single person that I've ever been around, they have a crazy competitive streak. It's this invisible thing. They're psychos. They're just different. They want to beat you at everything they do. And this is a telling lesson for you guys that are building a team, because she has a whole chapter in the book on recruiting. And I think one of the things you should look for is competitive people. The second thing that she said there that just I want to make sure we unpack, because I think great leaders are sort of aspirational people, meaning they want to live a certain way themselves. They aspire to be a certain way. And then when you're in their presence, whether it's a Tom Brady or a John Wooden or yourself or any great leader, you want to make them proud because you respect them. If you start connecting the dots of Monica's mindset, because a lot of times people just do things unconsciously very well. But I like to unpack them. There's this respect thing both ways, which is then aspirational. And then if you get someone competitive, they want to make you more proud than other people are making you proud. And now you've got this thing you can't really describe, but it wins
Yeah.
and it builds a culture. Honestly, I'm so really glad you're here because I debated today. Honestly, I'll tell the audience, I debated today, like this could be an uncomfortable topic. And a lot of times people listen to my show with their kids in the car. So today would be different. And I'm really grateful we're doing this because I love everybody that listens to this. And it breaks my heart to think some people will go through the vast majority of their lives and never really experience the pleasure of the ultimate extension of love is to be able to have that physical intimacy with somebody. And, I was thinking about that vacation sex that we were talking about a minute ago. The other element that happens is there's just more love present, and focusing on how much you love one another, I imagine can only intensify that connection, and the depth of the connection is just focusing on how much you love one another, not just the physical parts of where to touch me or where to do this or that, but it's also the emotional part of it, of how much you really love one another. And so many of you are working so hard in your life, you're raising families, you're growing yourself, you're growing your business, and you could get to the other side of your life and go, I missed out on like one of God's greatest blessings he bestows upon us is the physical pleasure we enjoy with somebody that we love in our life, right? And so what would you say to someone who says, man, it's been a while. We've been down this road a while. I'm just going to be real, everybody, probably less sex than you used to. And it's not as good as it once was. And now you've gotten busy. Maybe there's kids running around the house, or you both have 2 jobs, or you got to get your workout in. You got all these other things. You're just like, man, I just don't feel like doing it most of the time. What would you say to somebody who says that to you? Like, it's just become a pattern of not making it a priority. How do we switch that? Obviously, talking about it is one thing.
Talking about it. But the next thing would be prioritizing your pleasure and saying, like, this is something that's important to me. And that's why actually in Smart Sex, in my book, I write these 5 pillars because I realized of sexual intelligence, because I realized that, like, we prioritize everything else in our life, and sex is always like in the back burner. It's like the bastard child of the wellness industry. It's like sex should just feel good without prioritizing. It should just magically happen
without any work.
Great without any work. It takes work. So really, it's saying, like, would you be open to prioritizing it, like making sure? And then there's a lot of different ways to go about it. First, I want to say also is that it isn't for most people. I always say it's not as great as it once was. So it's prioritizing that we're gonna find out how we can connect with each other again intimately, and realize that sex isn't just about penetration. It is about intimacy, like you said. It's about sometimes it's just giving your partner a massage. It's making out. It's holding hands. It's feeling close again. Sometimes sex becomes this thing that we avoid because we're like, oh God, there's my partners, they're coming up and kiss me. That means sex has to happen. And then we avoid and we push them away. I don't have time for sex right now. We go from like 0 to sex. And there's all this like beautiful stuff in the middle of it where it's making out, or it's, a lot of people, I tell them massage. How about one night you give your partner a massage with nothing in return? And no, you don't have to go to massage school. It could just be, rubbing their shoulders, their back, getting some coconut oil and just rubbing their feet, something like that without the need to you're just receiving that night. You're just giving and then you're receiving. The next time you're doing it, you're doing the receiving or the giving, and you switch. And so it's like defining, like, what does that look like for us? And then also, I want people to figure out and kind of hack this. When is the best time for sex? Because I'm a huge fan of scheduling sex. I tell people this all the time. And hear me out, everyone, before you're like, that is not hot. Like, that is not a turn on. Like, I do not want to look at my calendar and be like, pick up dry cleaning, get kids from school, have sex. Like, you just, like, killed my arousal. No, but the thing is, just think about the things that you talk about this too all the time. You got to prioritize what's important. Your workouts. The talks with your staff, the talks with your kids. You got to put sex on the menu. You got to put sex on the calendar. And like, this is the night. And if the other thing I get people to do is like, what's keeping you from sex? Like, what is it? Well, we haven't got a babysitter in so long. We never take a vacation. The house is a mess. Like, I know for me, like, if my house is a mess and I haven't finished things, or it's too cold in the house, like, or the sheets aren't clean, I'm not going to want sex. So how do we think about, like, well, what does get me in the mood for sex? Well, I know I've worked out. I'm hydrated. I've cleared resentments with my partner, make sure there's a babysitter, or better yet, we got a hotel room for the night, or, whatever it is. What are all the factors? That's why that great exercise of what are the most memorable times we've had sex? That's also like pure gold. Because you can go, okay, most memorable time, what were all the elements there? And then reverse engineer it. How do we create that scenario so we can have more of that?
Yeah.
And even if you were in Hawaii and you're not in Hawaii, well, what is it about Hawaii? It's clean sheets. If it's room service, like maybe you can make sure that you have all the snacks that you love. If it's maybe you go for a walk that night so you're out in nature and you're feeling that. Maybe
it's some cocktails.
Some cocktails.
Right? Like maybe it's that.
Literally
right?
get some umbrellas
Yes,
with some
yes,
pineapple.
Yes.
It's all sensory experiences.
Well, you're a million. I love you. I think this is so good because I got to tell you that I have a friend of mine recently. You said something earlier I want to just touch on, especially for the men. And she goes, well, I know when he wants to have sex because he kissed me. And so what you just said is like, it's a lot of times with us men, I think, and I don't want to do gender specific stuff because it's way too big a generalization and probably not fair to either. Having said that though, he only kisses me when he wants to have sex. He's only getting really nice. He only tells me I'm really beautiful when he wants to have sex. And so there becomes this resistance almost like, oh, I know what you're doing. You're playing me here. You're setting me up for tonight, right?
Exactly.
Instead of just having that be present. That's why whatever your faith is or your love and your relationship, I think it's got to be present constantly to create an environment where the physical intimacy is the logical step next. And what you said about scheduling it, let's just be real. In this day and age, as busy as we all are, what doesn't go scheduled doesn't happen.
Exactly.
And you're like, you fit it in somewhere. And it's like, and by the way, I think sometimes the fact that you schedule it tells somebody how important they are to you. Right? Like, you really matter to me. It's not like something I'll fit in between the stuff that really matters to me. This is a priority for me. So I'm really big. Okay, now we're going to get kind of in some nitty gritty, like tangible physical stuff here. So this is where it gets a little uncomfy for me, but I want to go there. Here we go. I want to know in a woman's case, do they know what gives them pleasure? In other words, is there some benefit to experiencing one's self to figure out what areas do feel good so that you can tell your male partner what areas feel good? And are some women gone through their lives, or men, but you said it's easier for a man to orgasm, so I'm asking about women.
Yeah.
They're at a point in their life where they're 25 or 30 and maybe they don't know exactly what, because what I learned from you is that clitoral area, that vulva area, there's different parts that may feel better than other parts, and perhaps experiencing that by yourself first could help you communicate it to another, the person that you love.
Ed, I love that you're bringing it up. What we're talking about is self-pleasure.
Right.
We're talking about masturbation. And masturbation, again, talking about shame. There's so much like shame around it. Or maybe you grew up in a household where you were told that it was wrong and you're going to grow hair on your palms or whatever all the old tropes are about that. But actually, masturbation is a really healthy part, a really important part of being sexually healthy overall, because that's how you learn what feels good to you. Your partner is not a mind reader. He's not going to come in and know exactly how it all works. And in fact,
or she,
exactly. She doesn't know either. I think masturbation is great when you're in a relationship, when you're out of a relationship. And what I hear from a lot of people, in my listeners too, are like, I caught my partner masturbating, and doesn't mean that like they don't love me anymore, they're not into me, or is it cheating? And I'm just gonna say it's about like it's a really healthy part about understanding it's a connection with yourself. You're learning things. You don't have to worry about like your partner looking at you. There yet? Are you there yet? I mean, I for myself, I don't think I masturbated till I was like in my like late 20s, mid to late 20s. I realized that like I just never thought about it. I was like, well, I have a partner. I don't need to. And I hear the people a lot of times, well, I don't need to have a partner. And I'm telling you, and I'm encouraging you, just take some time alone to say like, take a mirror and like look between your legs. What's actually going on there? Do you notice when you touch certain parts that it feels good? Does it not feel as good? That's how you learn. And then you get to tell your partner, like, look what I discovered. Like, look what feels really good to me. Because you're responsible for your own pleasure. And I used to blame partners too. I'd say, well, they didn't give me an orgasm and they didn't do this for me. And now knowing what I know after doing this for so long, I realized like they've no way of knowing, because everyone's different. If you put 100 women in a room and they were all touching themselves, they would all be doing something differently. They would. It's different for everyone. There's not like this universal. I mean, the parts might be the same, but is it a tapping? Is it a light motion with their fingers? Are they on their stomach or are they on their back? We all learn different ways to pleasure, so have some fun with it and get curious.
Right. And I want to be clear, like if you have an understanding in your relationship where you do feel like, oh, they're imagining someone else that's bad, then maybe that's not right for you. Or there's a religious reason that you may not do it. I get all of that, but I'm saying in general, it's pretty difficult to express to somebody that which gives you pleasure if you're unaware of what that is.
Right, exactly.
And so, there's a way to experience that.
There's a great hack for that. And this, again, once you can get to play, like masturbation's okay, do it together. Like mutual masturbation together, if you're both doing it, you're like, oh, because not only can it be really sexy.
That's a really interesting. That's a really, really good suggestion. Yeah.
Because then you're like, oh, I didn't realize that you moved your hand that way. So now when I touch you, I didn't know that you wrapped your hand around, if you're a man, like around your shaft. Like I'll do that then the next time because I'm just sitting here trying to figure it out too. So then you're learning. So it's hot, but then you're like, oh, that's what you do. I'm going to do that too the next time I touch you.
Right. I'm so glad we're talking about this.
Show and tell.
It's not been as completely painful or as uncomfortable for me as I thought it would be.
I think it's great. You're
I'm like really grateful that we are.